Here is your 5-minute video script. Picture a young man at Harvard in the early 1960s. The kind of place where the path forward seems already written for you. Law school, a quiet office, a respectable life. Then one day an accident takes the sight in one of his eyes. Instead of breaking him, it breaks something open inside him. He walks away from Harvard, away from everything that was supposed to come next, and sets out across Europe, the Middle East and Asia, searching for something he cannot even fully name yet. That search eventually leads him to a small room in India, face to face with a man the world would come to know as the Dalai Lama. That young man's name was Robert Thurman, and this week, at the age of 84, he passed away, leaving behind one of the most unlikely and remarkable life stories in modern American history. If you only know the name Thurman because of his daughter, Hollywood legend Uma Thurman, star of Kill Bill and Pulp Fiction, you are about to learn that her father's own story is just as extraordinary, just told in a completely different world. Robert Thurman died on Tuesday, June 16th in Woodstock, New York. The news was announced by Tibet House US, the very organization he helped build from nothing decades earlier, describing him as a prominent Buddhist scholar, author, and translator whose teachings shaped countless lives. The announcement ended with a Buddhist mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, which translates to the jewel in the lotus, a quiet, fitting farewell for a man who spent his entire life trying to carry the wisdom of one culture into the heart of another. So how does a kid from an elite East Coast boarding school end up becoming one of the most important Buddhist scholars in American history? After leaving Harvard following that life-altering accident, Robert wandered for years, driven by a hunger most people never allow themselves to feel. And in 1962, his wandering brought him to India, where he encountered the Dalai Lama for the first time. Something about that meeting rearranged everything inside him. He began studying the Tibetan language, immersing himself in Buddhist philosophy with an intensity that bordered on obsession, and eventually made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He chose to be ordained as a Tibetan Buddhist monk. And he was not just any monk. He became the first Westerner ever ordained directly by the Dalai Lama, a distinction that gave him a kind of credibility and access that almost no other American scholar in history has ever held. Eventually, Robert left monastic life behind, married, and built a family. But the devotion never left him. He returned to Harvard, this time finishing what he started, earning first a master's degree and then a doctorate in Sanskrit and Indian studies. He taught for years at Amherst College before landing at Columbia University, where his life would take on an entirely new dimension. At Columbia, he was given the Je Tsongkhapa, Professorship of Indo-Tibetan Buddhist Studies. And here is the detail that really shows how significant this was. It was the very first endowed chair in Buddhist studies anywhere in the Western world. Think about that. Before Robert Thurman, there was no formal seat of academic power dedicated entirely to Tibetan Buddhist scholarship in America. He built that seat. He sat in it for decades, becoming something of a legend on campus, known for his magnetic storytelling and his rare gift for making ancient, complicated philosophy feel alive and urgent to a room full of 20-year-old college students. But his impact reached far beyond the classroom. In 1987, he co-founded Tibet House US, a nonprofit built around a singular mission, protecting and preserving Tibetan culture at a moment when that culture was under enormous threat. The organization became one of the most visible platforms in the entire country for Tibetan advocacy, hosting events and educational programs that pulled global attention toward a cause that desperately needed it. For Robert, this was never just an academic exercise. He spoke openly about how the Tibetan people, and the Dalai Lama in particular, had given him what he called basic sanity in his own personal search for meaning. His commitment was not theoretical, it was personal, lived, and constant. By 1997, the impact of his work had grown so large that Time magazine named him one of the 25 most influential Americans alive, an almost unthinkable honor for a man whose entire career was built around a religious tradition most Americans, at the time, barely understood. He went on to write and translate numerous books, helping bring centuries-old Tibetan teachings to readers who would have otherwise never encountered them in their lifetime. He retired from Columbia in 2019, but those who knew him say retirement barely slowed him down at all. He kept writing, he kept speaking, he kept showing up. Robert Thurman is survived by his children, including Uma, Maipam, Gandon, Taya, and Dechen Thurman. And while his daughter's fame in Hollywood brought a certain spotlight to his life that he may never have received otherwise, anyone who actually studied under him, worked alongside him, or simply sat in one of his lectures will tell you the same thing. His legacy never needed his daughter's fame to stand on its own. He built something rare, a bridge between two worlds that, on paper, should have had almost nothing in common: Ivy League academia and Himalayan spiritual tradition. And he spent 60 years walking back and forth across that bridge, carrying wisdom in both directions. So as tributes continue pouring in from former students, fellow scholars, and members of the global Buddhist community, it's worth sitting with the full shape of this man's life for a moment. A boy who lost his sight in one eye and somehow saw more clearly than almost anyone around him. A scholar who left Harvard chasing a question and came back decades later, having helped build an entire field of study from scratch. Robert Thurman did not just study Tibetan Buddhism from a distance. He lived inside it, breathed it, and spent his life making sure the rest of the world had the chance to understand it too. And in doing so, he left behind something far more enduring than fame. He left behind a body of work and a community of people who will continue carrying that wisdom forward for generations to come.